Hey there, everybody. This is Phoenix Aurelius. Thank you for joining me for this Alchemi-Culture episode tonight. It's just me, and I'm just going to be talking about a little bit of agriculture. Not your bag, no worries. Turn us off. Go find something you are interested in. But if you are interested in sustainable agriculture, I have a really important hack that I want to talk about. This is in the vein of integrated pest management. For anybody who's tried to grow anything from houseplants all the way up to, large scale farming, integrated pest management is absolutely something that we can swear up and down by, that it makes an enormous difference. That is, that throughout the life cycle and our time stewarding or caring for that plant, we end up doing little things along the way that make a big difference in terms of its pest susceptibility. So this could be, that you're not going to have pests like rats eat it. It could be, mostly insects, having things like scale and aphids and spider mites and, even powdery mildew and all of the other different types of pests, be they bacterial, fungal, parasitic, even be they insect-based, mammalian-based, reptilian-based, whatever, any sort of life form. If it's a problem that ends up harming the plant, we consider that a pest. So what do we do about this? Well, one of the things that I have found to be most useful is performing an integrated pest management foliar spray. Now, I'm including a Google Drive link to a printable PDF of what I created years ago as the Alchemi-Culture foliar spray. And it's actually two different documents in one. It's in landscape orientation, so that you'll have the 3-gallon foliar spray recipe on the left-hand side and a 1-gallon foliar spray recipe on the right-hand side. And you'll notice that they're scalable. So if you have an enormous farm, like a cannabis farm, for instance, and you have lots of plants that need to be sprayed, no worries. Just go ahead and scale up the recipe to whatever size sprayer or tank that you have, and then you can spray it using whatever spray head or nozzle that you're already using. With that being said, there's really only 4 ingredients. The first is water. The second is organic neem oil, and the necessity for it to be organic is not necessarily there, but you should definitely consider purchasing organic to support those organic farmers and to keep any other non-OMRI materials out of your garden. The third is actually going to be Agsil 16H, or an agricultural-based potassium silicate. This can be in liquid form. I find it better to be able to blend up my own. It's definitely cheaper that way as well if you buy water-soluble potassium silicate that is agricultural grade. And my favorite product is Agsil 16H. And I got turned on to this by Yeti Christ, or Ryan Yeti Christ. And this was something that he taught me when I was doing cannabis grows up in Portland, and something that he and I instilled as this recipe initially with Grow Green Cannabis Solutions, which was a little side hustle, a business that I had my hands in and founded during my time in Portland to help other people get interested in our no-till agricultural method. So with that being said, the next thing that you need is aloe vera or aloe vera extract. Now, I find that it's very affordable. It is a large initial investment in terms of most people's just budgets, especially if you're just a hobby gardener or whatever, to purchase a good amount of Agsil 16H and aloe vera extract, but you need so little of them that they last a very long time. Especially if you aren't doing this for any sort of commercial exploit and you're just a home gardener, you'll find that they last quite a long time because you only need to spray certain plants. Now, neem oil helps to get rid of thrips, whiteflies, black flies, aphids, spider mites, leaf miner. God, basically you name it. That's absolutely probably the best preventative and sometimes even topical treatment that you can give on your plants as an organic option to keep them off or get them off or to completely eliminate them. Basically the only thing that you need to keep in mind is that a single application of neem oil is not going to work. So how do we do it? Well, you find out the life cycle of whatever pest is harming your garden, you take a look at it and then you spray accordingly. So like, for instance, aphids have a life cycle where they hatch from an egg, they breed within a day or two, they lay eggs, and then that cycle repeats ad infinitum until the plant is either destroyed and they move on, or until you end their life and allow the plant to live on. So what this looks like is spraying every day for 3 days straight, and sometimes just a fourth day just for good measure. That should be able to do it. Now, it's going to be different for leaf miner, which has, more or less like a 15-day larval cycle, and then they live life as a fly. They go on the underside of the leaves. They deposit their ova. The ova then, hatch into tiny larvae that work their way into the intercellular layer, and so on and so forth. So you have to learn about the life cycle of the insect. And unfortunately, I don't have enough details right in front of me to be able to say all of these things right off the top of my head. So just go out, do your research. All of this stuff is pretty easily found by most of the agricultural universities across the nation. And they luckily have compiled this data and put them on websites so that with a simple Google or Ecosia search or whatever search engine you're using, DuckDuckGo, etc., that you'll be able to find this. Now, there is technically a fifth ingredient that could be used, and that is called sprouted barley milk or malted barley milk. Now, the way that you should ideally do this is to take 1 cup of barley. Well, you can even use less. You can take 1 cup of barley or 1 cup of corn. And what you do is you sprout it. You stick it inside of a sprouting jar. You soak it for about 8 hours. Then you drain it and allow it to sit there for 8 more hours or 4 more hours or whatever, and then rinse it and then keep doing that until it develops these nice little tails. And when it develops those nice little tails, the grain has sprouted, which means that it has released a tremendous amount of enzymes and nutrition, but specifically enzymes. So those enzymes are actually tremendously important for us in the context of this integrated pest management foliar spray, because they provide enzymes to the plant, especially on their exterior, once we're spraying them on all the aerial parts, that are going to break apart things that can't withstand those enzymes, like powdery mildew, for instance. And so if you're battling powdery mildew, especially in the hot summer months or any time where there's been a large amount of water and then suddenly it gets hot, especially hot days and cool nights, or if you already have a susceptibility to powdery mildew, which, by the way, the vector for that spreading is a woolly aphid. If you have woolly aphids on your property or anywhere within your neighbor's fields or other things like this, depending on the size of your grow operation, then you're going to want to consider including, just from the beginning of the season, sprouted corn or barley tea. Now, it doesn't matter if you use sprouted corn versus sprouted barley. In my experience, not so much, but you can sprout them together if you want to do half and half, or whatever is a little bit easier for you to procure. For me, because I brew a lot, it's easy for me to malt barley, and so I can get barley that still has its husks on that is good for malting, so that I can malt it myself. And if you do it that way, then you can save a ton of money. But not everybody's going to have that same lifestyle or even the same budget to be able to purchase, 55 pounds of unmalted barley. So you can get sprouting barley, which is something that is pretty easily available in 1 and 2 and 3 pound quantities and stuff like that. That makes it much more affordable. And you can also buy popcorn, organic popcorn, and sprout that popcorn. When you do that, then you're able to save a bunch of money, because you can usually just go to the store and buy these in bulk bins. Just about any grocery store across the nation that has bulk bins will have organic popcorn. If they don't, ask them to carry it. So with that being said, all you do is you sprout that barley or sprout that corn by letting it sit for, roughly 3 days after, initially soaking, draining it out, letting it sit for a while, rinsing it off to keep it moist, drain out all the water after you rinse it, of course, and then just keep letting it sprout just like anything else, just like you're sprouting, greens for microgreens for your kitchen or whatever else. It's virtually the same process. So you're able to do this just in a mason jar with a special sprouting top, and this is going to give you about 1.5 cups, 1.25 to 1.5 cups of sprouted grain. And the reason why it increased from the amount of dry grain, of course, is because it's absorbed some moisture and therefore expanded a little bit. But then you just take that cup or cup and a half or however much you have volumetrically of sprouted grain, you stick it in a blender, you fill up just enough water to be able to blend it very, very thoroughly and make like a milk out of it. Traditionally, the concoction is about 4-to-1, 4 parts of water to 1 part of your grain. And this is going to make like a sprouted corn or a sprouted barley milk. And then you just add that milk to the spray recipe in place of some of the water. And then you're going to be able to stop powdery mildew and add enzymes to your plants. And you'll just see the overall response that your plants have. Now, the rest of these ingredients also have some massive benefits. For instance, Agsil-16H is a potassium silicate, as I alluded to earlier. And potassium silicate is necessary, especially silica, is necessary for the strong structure of a plant. And potassium is necessary for almost all of the cellular functions of a plant. It's very, very critically important. So you're providing both of these in a foliar spray. And yes, plants do take in nutrition through their leaves. And so you're giving it some good nutrition that's specifically going to make it nice and strong. But if you add too much, it will make it stocky. So just using the right amount is very, very important because you don't want any material that is kind of short and stocky. And nor do you want anything that doesn't have enough potassium silicate and is too leggy and very long. You want a good balance of the two. And so by being able to follow this recipe to the T, you'll be able to do that. And again, for every gallon, we're only using about 1/3 of a teaspoon of Agsil-16H. Now, the same thing is true with the aloe vera extract, that we're only using 1/3 of a teaspoon of that. And the aloe vera extract actually helps it. First of all, aloe vera has a tremendous amount of saponins. And so the saponins are able to help distribute all of this concoction across the leaf in a more cohesive way. So on just a biochemistry perspective, or just on a mechanical perspective, it's really good for that in the context of this formulation. But from a biochemistry perspective, aloe vera extract does the same things to plants that it does to humans. So like when you get sunburn, you put aloe vera extract or an aloe vera gel or other types of aloe vera products on your skin. They help the skin recover faster. And they also help to draw out heat from the body. They're very, very cooling. All of these aloe vera extracts are. So in the context of our foliar spray, it helps to develop a heat tolerance and a temperature resistance to the plants, specifically of their aerial parts, that are really awesome. Now, maybe in another episode, we'll unpack coconut water, aloe vera, potassium silicate root drench that I use that does the same things for the roots, because there are, of course, above ground and below ground parts to plants. So we can unpack that another time. But for the purpose of this foliar spray, adding the aloe vera to the foliar spray is going to help create that temperature resistance that is absolutely fantastic. So it's just water, neem oil, Agsil, aloe vera, and optionally sprouted corn tea or sprouted barley tea in order to prevent or treat powdery mildew. It's very easy. And then you add this to a sprayer and you spray it away. Now, in the link here, I will also, or in the descriptions, I will include a link to the 3-gallon sprayer that I suggest using and also the 1-gallon sprayer that I suggest using. And these are going to be based on ones that I have used in the past and that I am currently using at present inside of all of my agricultural work here at the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy. Also, purchasing those are going to be able to give us a little bit of kickback if you purchase the ones from the specific links here to help fund further research that we're doing and to be able to provide content like this. So go ahead and try this. You can use this as a base recipe as well. Other things can be added to it. I do not suggest adding foliar pack microbes to this, though, because the neem oil isn't going to play so terribly well with the microbes. That's something that I wouldn't suggest adding, but you can add a little bit of shilajit or mumio. That's something that I regularly do because there's humic acid and fulvic acid. I also like to add humic acid just on its own, or humic acid and kelp meal extracts in there, in order to be able, and you'll want to make sure that if you use any extracts or anything, that they are fully water soluble. And when you do this, then you're providing a lot of nutrition to the plant, especially with the humic acid foliar spray and the kelp meal foliar spray. Those types of things, they get taken up through the leaf, and that's made really awesome nutrition so that you can still have really poor soil quality, but you're providing the plant with certain nutrients that it needs through the foliar sprays. And yes, in most cases, just as long as it's not microbes that you're adding, you can do different foliar sprays. Now, some of you may have heard me talk about spagirzyme in the past and talk about the sea salt and spagirzyme spray that can be used as a foliar spray as well. And that's actually really easy, really awesome to use, but you don't want to do these at the same time. You'll probably want to do them at least 1 to 3 days apart. If you don't have any pests and you're doing this as a preventative method for IPM, integrated pest management, then you're going to want to spray once a week. That's called a preventative spray regimen. However, if you are experiencing a pest issue, you need to find out its life cycle and spray regularly enough to be able to kill and eliminate any of the pests that might be up and coming on the materials. For instance, if you're using leaf miner, you're probably going to want to spray about every other day for 15 days. If you're working with aphids, every day for 3 days. Same thing with spider mites, every day for 3 to 5 days. These are the types of things that you're going to learn by using this type of foliar spray in order to address imbalances that have already started to arise based on the life cycle of the insect or the prey, or the predator that you are looking to eliminate. And ideally, you don't just rely on foliar sprays. For instance, if you have a proclivity to aphids, make sure that you have lots of ladybug larvae. Create homes for the ladybugs, which, this takes a little bit of research, but not much. Find out what types of flowers that they like to live in that grow well in your area, or what types of things that they're attracted to by way of housing, and be able to establish those things inside of your garden so that you don't just import tons of ladybugs and then they all fly away somewhere else. You want to make sure that they stay in your garden, but in order to do that, they need to have food, which they should have by the aphids. They're also going to need to have water, just like any living thing, and they're going to need to have shelter. So if you can't provide the water and the shelter for them, then it doesn't matter how much food is there, it's still an inhospitable environment, and they'll end up leaving. So you'll want to use like ladybug larvae. You'll want to use parasitic wasps. You'll want to use, nematodes in the soil. You'll want to use, all sorts of different types of beneficial insects and beneficial predators that are going to be able to help eliminate the issues that you have. Also, you can do this just with sticking with planting things that repel certain bugs or insects near the base of all of your crop plants. So, basil and oregano and thyme and all these other herbs that go really well, by the way, with tomatoes, work really well with tomatoes and eggplants and peppers and other nightshades. Marigold would be another option. So there are lots of different things that you can actually do for a holistic spectrum of integrated pest management. But for this, the foliar spray is going to be absolutely awesome because it's a next level of deterrent. And one thing that I've used, as many of you know, tobacco is one of the very best substances that can be used for foliar sprays in order to get rid of a wide variety of insects. And that's because tobacco, of course, contains nicotine, and nicotine is an acetylcholine adapter. And this tends to repel most insects. They die if they come into contact with it. There's very few insects that absolutely love it. So, with that being said, one thing that you can consider doing is adding a small amount of tobacco product, either a water soluble or an ethanol soluble, to your foliar spray. For instance, here at the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy, we have spagyric tincture of Nahuatl, which is a type of indigenous North American flowering tobacco. And I take a whole aerial part extract of this in spagyric form, a spagyric tincture of this, and add about 56 drops per gallon and a half of this base foliar spray recipe in order to really put the 1-2, especially on aphids. Those green potato aphids are something that out here in Utah, and even we had them a lot in Oregon, that really mess with a whole lot of crops. I see them sometimes on apples. They definitely, black aphids and other things swarm all over the wild carrot seeds once they start to seed. There's so many different types of aphids. The woolly aphids obviously somehow end up on my grapes every year because we have to fight powdery mildew. They end up on our squash. We have to fight powdery mildew. And they are the main vector, of course, for powdery mildew. And so that's how I know that the aphids would have been there in the first place. And if you have ant problems, most likely you have aphid problems, because ants farm aphids in the same way that we farm bees. We love their nectar that they produce, and ants love the nectar of aphids. And so if you have these things, increasing your foliar spray regimen to match the different types of predators that are there, either preventatively or doing it diagnostically, is something that's going to help you. So again, I've got a tremendous amount of Alchemi-Culture resources. This one is one of the many that I'll be giving you for free. And again, it's a gallon foliar spray recipe, and I will include links to all of the products that I suggest purchasing: the Neem Oil, the Agsil, the Aloe Vera extract, sprouted corn or sprouting barley, and of course, the 1 and 3 gallon sprayers that I suggest using. So that if you don't already have these materials or don't know where to get them, there will be some direct links. Of course, if you can find them cheaper somewhere else and that makes sense for you, by all means, please do it. Some of the links that I provide, in fact, most of them should be referral links, so we get a very small portion of the proceeds. So if you'd like to support our work and just say thank you for offering this type of information, please feel free to use those links, and that will help us continue offering information like this. So that's pretty much all I've got for you tonight. If you like this episode, go ahead and hit subscribe, like, share it with your friends, share it on socials, let other people know about this type of stuff, especially things like this where it's useful information that people can actually practically put into use immediately. So at any rate, this is Phoenix Aurelius. Thank you so much for joining me on this Alchemi-Culture episode, where we talk a little bit more about agriculture and foliar sprays in particular. Thanks so much. Have a great night.